Science fiction thinking is a key driver, and many of us grew up reading science fiction and getting totally inspired about traveling in space and other areas, going under the oceans with those. We have with us to talk about science fiction, or sci-fi die as the mechanism is called, Ken Merkel. Ken is one of our key community members, one of our ExO community members, lives in Edmonton in Canada, and he's going to talk to us about science fiction thinking and how do we bring that to life. Over to Ken.
I'm Ken Merkel with ExO Execute. We're a group of ExO ambassadors, consultants, and coaches here in Canada. On the third day of the ExO World Conference, I'm sure I don't need to be telling you about linear versus exponential, or that technology is going to change our world in ways we can't even imagine. But what if I said there was a proven way for us to imagine those futures? You see, the problem isn't that technology is changing our world so quickly. It's that the linear nature of the human brain makes it difficult for us to envision what our future could look like. With technology changing at a rate much faster than humans are capable of, we need new tools that remove our biases and help us think further out and in an exponential way. So how does SciFi Digital Intelligence do that? Well, first I want to take a step back and introduce you to Kyle Nell. During his time as Executive Director of the Lowe's Innovation Lab, he tried many methods to not only figure out what they should be doing, but to convince leadership that these were the things they needed to do, to spur them into action and to change their behaviors. Being a sci-fi fan, he recognized that science fiction writers were uniquely qualified to take in information on what could happen and envision all kinds of new probable futures. He also recognized that science fiction opens our minds to those probable futures through compelling stories that make us believers in those futures and enable us to take action to create them. So what he did was hire a bunch of science fiction writers, give them their marketing research and trend data, and sent them off to envision new futures. Now they came back with real stories that solved today's problems with future technology. Then Kyle took it one step further and turned those stories into comic books. So why do you choose comic books? Well, comics allow us to leave our biases behind, to suspend disbelief, even if just for a moment. Suspend our disbelief enough for us to shift our minds toward how we can instead of why we can't. So imagine sitting in a room full of executives and giving them comic books to read. That's exactly what Kyle did at Lowe's. And what happened was they were able to shift their mindsets to see the stories as real possibilities, and they were motivated into action. Those comics have turned Lowe's into a global leader in augmented and virtual reality, autonomous robots, exoskeletons, and 3D printers, including the first 3D printer in space. So you might hear a lot about how science fiction has predicted the future, but that's not what's happening at all. What's happening is that science fiction that shows a compelling and desirable future motivates us to action, as Jean-Luc Picard says, to make it so. Star Trek is in fact a great example. There are at least a dozen things either in our lives right now or on the horizon that originated from Star Trek. Did Star Trek predict the cell phone? Well, no, the cell phone was created from the vision that was enabled by Star Trek. So I first learned about SciFi Die through a course in behavioral transformation with Singularity University. Because I didn't have access to a bunch of science fiction writers, I wondered, would this work with just any group, or do I have to have science fiction writers? So we set out to test this with a team of 60 IT staff who were definitely not science fiction writers. A couple days before our session, we sent them a bunch of data and research on all kinds of available technology, much like you've received over the last 2 days. We didn't tell them anything else except to say it was going to be exciting. We really didn't know how it was going to work. On the day of the session, we spent 10 minutes teaching the basic structure of a good narrative, and we split them into small groups to send them off for 90 minutes to come up with stories of the future anywhere from 10 to 20 years out. When we brought them back together, they shared 8 incredible stories of futures far beyond my expectations. There was everything from a family man who transformed himself from a truck driver to an autonomous repair technician via virtual reality, to a day in the life of a family of the future, using autonomous vehicles, biometrics, augmented and virtual reality throughout the day. They were truly compelling stories, that made us want to run off and create those possible futures. So today in the Sci-Fi Die session, you are going to be writing the stories of our new futures. As Salim says, Star Trek futures instead of Mad Max futures. Together, we will develop compelling future visions for health and wellness, education and learning, environment and planetary health, prosperity and economy, and a day in the life in general, 20 years from now. I know that the stories we come up with today will all be part of possible futures. After the conference, we'll take all of those stories you write, put them together into finished comic books that we'll share on the Open ExO platform. These comics will get us all into a believing mindset, believing that these futures are possible. Once we believe that, we can start to think, why can't we make them possible? And the answer is, we can. So we invite you as exponential leaders to join us in the Sci-Fi Die session, where we're going to imagine new futures. In the afternoon, in the open sessions, we'll start taking the first steps towards those futures. Together, we will build a better future for us all. We'll see you in the Sci-Fi Die session.
All right, thank you, Ken. And not to miss the background music there, which was the Star Trek theme. I mean, seriously, amazing kind of production. I don't know how he did that. So, you know, the science fiction kind of model is super important around this. And I want to just do another shout out to the Roddenberry family and foundation, because it's very easy for science fiction to be negative. And if you look at all the movies about the future, you have The Matrix, you have Skynet, you have the robot. You know, typically it's always dystopian, right? The robot overlords come and take over the world. And as I said earlier, a couple of days ago, if we're lucky, it's always painted that if we're lucky, we're pets, and if we're unlucky, we're food. That's kind of the way it goes. But the positive future that can be painted by science fiction, and Star Trek in particular, is a really, really important anchor for the future. And so thank you, Ken, for showing us that model. And we can actually bring that to bear.
So I'm actually going to get started. We've got 50 participants in here, and I got about 10 minutes of instruction to go through before we break out into the visioning rooms. So we'll start right now, and I can catch people up later if they come in late. Let me just find my screen here. So if you have questions, if you can just throw those into the chat, and then we'll deal with the questions kind of after we get through the presentation. We'll try to get through the presentation, so if everybody wants to mute. And everyone seeing my screen okay? Thumbs up, Oliver. Great. So we're going to kind of go through the structure of how today will work. I'm just going to bring up the chat here so I can see what's going on. And then we'll talk about how things work in Zoom. We're going to talk a little bit about a narrative and writing a narrative. And then we're going to break you off into separate breakout rooms. And then start developing narratives. And so this should be pretty quick, maybe 10 minutes. We want to give you as much time as possible for developing your narratives. So building a narrative was a video, but we couldn't get that working. Although now in Zoom, I could probably do it. That's okay. We're going to go through the Google Slides and how to build your narrative inside of the Google Slides. A little bit again on Zoom how-to, and then we'll show you that breakout structure. And then, you know, so this was obviously built for us being in Hop Into, but now we will just stay inside of this Zoom room. So our moderators today, we have Gerardo. He's going to be looking after prosperity and economy topic. Ben Clayton will be looking after the environment and planetary health topic. Brad couldn't make it today. He's actually ran into some family issues with COVID. So hopefully that clears up for him. So Darcy's going to take on education and learning and health and wellness. And then I'm going to kind of stay in the main room But we'll break out people as well into a day in the life. So if you just want to do a day in the life, 15 to 20 years from now, what does that look like? A little bit more of a generic narrative, then that's possible as well. Let's get into building a narrative. We're going to go through really quickly. What we're looking for is really kind of a simple 3-act narrative, right? In Act 1, you're doing the setup, using the visuals and things like that to create a setup. So we're looking for something that's a little bit visual, but we want you to get a good narrative story down too. And then basically in Act 2, there's usually a crisis or a problem or a confrontation that builds up. And what we're looking for is how do we use technology and leverage technology in abundance to then resolve that problem and finishes off in Act 3. So in the slides, you will also see a copy of this. It's just to help you put your thoughts together as a group. Again, we're going to split you into groups, probably about 8 or 9 people around there, and you're going to work out a narrative for your story. I'm going to quickly jump into the Google template here. Are you guys seeing that, or do I have to do a new share? Oliver, are you seeing the Google slides? Yeah.
See it.
Okay, so we've created a bunch of these. So each team will get their own, and it's Google Slides. So your whole team will be able to work in that slide together. Inside of here, there's a bunch of templates. So there's a title template. You can give your team a name and throw your names and your email addresses in there on your title page. And you can throw a nice background in there if you want. And then we have a few comic looking templates. But I actually find that and a few samples of covers and storyboards. But what I find the easiest thing to do is to just add a blank slide. So one of the layouts we have is a blank slide because it's really easy then to deal with one screen at a time or one narrative at a time. And you can quickly change the background. And you can, when you choose image, you can search straight in Google image searches for a background for your page. And then the other thing that's really easy to do within here is to paste images. So you can insert images straight from search the web, comes up on your right-hand side, and you can search images. A good thing to do is put your first word as transparent and then the subject matter that you're looking for. Try not to spend too much time showing you guys how to use Google Slides. I think you're probably a lot are familiar with that. Sometimes it's going to be easier though to go out to another tab and then paste the graphics in. But if you use that transparent image search, it will help to get good graphics onto your slides. We also created a helper graphic, so there'll be one of these in each of the folders as well. There's a whole bunch of helper graphics in these that you can copy and paste into yours. So that pretty much covers how to work within the Google Slide template. I'm just going to check into the chat here. Yeah, so we're going to give everybody access to the slides when we go into the breakout rooms, and we will show everybody where those are as well. We'll put that in the chat. So if I go through here, so we're going to show you what the room structure is. Now again, we're going to stay inside of this room. Originally, we were going to break out to a bunch of different Zoom rooms, but I think right now is we're going to do all of the topics inside of this Zoom room. And we'll break you out into different topic groups. And then we'll have our moderators just move around through the different breakout rooms. So this is what the drive is going to look like. So within the Google Drive, and we'll put the link in the chat. Darcy, if you want to put the link in there now for me. and just everybody can make sure you can access it. We made it publicly accessible, so everybody should be good. So there's the 5 folders in there for the different topics. And then when you go into the folder, there's one for each team. So each team will get, based on your breakout room, will assign you to one of the storyboard templates. And then, so don't go into them yet, wait till you're in a team, and we'll tell you which one to use when you go in there. So the only final thing is, when we break you out into rooms, you're gonna see this pop up, asking you to join a breakout room. Click on join the breakout room. And when you're in the breakout room, if you need any help or you have any questions, there's an ask for help on the bottom. If you click that, it will invite me to come and help you, and then we'll send a moderator into your room to give you a hand. And whenever this pops up, when you want to leave, you're going to get this, because you could also leave that and return to the main session. Make sure you don't click leave meeting, because then you're going to bump right out. So one thing is, if you've got a bad connection or if you accidentally leave the meeting, remember what room you're in, so that when you come back in, we can put you back into the room that you were in.